story. Unknown one, it was 10:47 p.m. when I saw my daughter standing at the end of the hallway, but my daughter had been dead for 3 years. I remember the exact moment because I'd been staring at the clock on the cable box, watching the minutes crawl.
Toward 11, toward the end of Halloween, toward the moment I could finally breathe again.
October 31st had always been difficult since the accident, but this year felt different, heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on my chest, thick with something I couldn't name. I was alone in my house in suburban Connecticut, a split level I'd bought after the divorce, after everything fell apart. The neighborhood was quiet that night. Most families had finished trick-or-treating by 9, and by 10 the streets were empty, except for the scattered remains of candy wrappers and the glow of carved pumpkins slowly burning out on porches. I'd turned off my porch light at 8:30, ignoring the occasional knock that came after, pretending I wasn't home. I couldn't bear to see children in costumes, couldn't bear their laughter, their innocence, their aliveness. Emma had been 7 when it happened. Halloween night, 3 years ago. She'd been trick-or-treating with her mother, my ex-wife Diane, when a driver, drunk and speeding, had jumped the curb. Emma died instantly. Diane survived with minor injuries. Our marriage didn't survive at all. I'd spent the evening trying to distract myself. Television played in the background, some mindless sitcom I wasn't really watching. I'd had 3 glasses of whiskey, enough to dull the edges but not enough to silence the memories. The house was too quiet. I kept hearing phantom sounds, a child's laugh, the rustle of a costume, footsteps on the stairs, but when I'd turned to look there was nothing, just empty rooms and the settling sounds of an old house. That's what I told myself when I saw her. She was standing at the far end of the hallway, near the bathroom, exactly where the hallway light created that transition between brightness and shadow. She wore the princess costume she'd picked out that last Halloween, the blue dress with the white apron, the plastic tiara, the black shoes that had clicked on every surface. Her blonde hair was in pigtails, the way Diane always styled it. She was just standing there, perfectly still facing me. My first thought wasn't terror, it was confusion, that floating sensation where your brain tries to process impossible information and comes up empty. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and blamed the whiskey. When I looked again, she was still there. "Emma?" My voice came out as a whisper, broken and small. She didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, watching me with eyes I couldn't quite see in the dim light. The hallway stretched between us like a canyon, and I found myself unable to move.
Unable to breathe, unable to do anything but stare at this impossible thing I'd heard about grief hallucinations.
After Emma died, I'd read everything I could find about loss, trying to understand the weight that had settled over me like a burial shroud. I knew that the mind could play tricks, could conjure images of the departed in moments of extreme emotion. This had to be that. A hallucination, a manifestation of my grief and the whiskey and the significance of the date, but she looked so real. I stood up from the couch, my legs unsteady, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Emma, sweetheart, is that
You? She tilted her head to the side, that curious gesture she used to make when she was confused or thinking.
Then slowly she raised one hand and pointed at me. Not beckoning, not waving, just pointing, her small finger extended, her arm rigid. The temperature in the house dropped suddenly, dramatically. I could see my breath misting in the air, could feel the cold seeping through my clothes, settling into my bones. The television behind me flickered, the sound cutting in and out with a rhythmic buzzing that made my teeth ache. "This isn't real," I said aloud, trying to convince myself. "You're not real. You're not here." She took a step toward me, then another. Her shoes made that familiar clicking sound against the hardwood floor, a sound I hadn't heard in 3 years, a sound that had haunted my dreams. With each step, she remained in that strange zone of half-light, never quite emerging into full visibility, never quite receding into shadow. I wanted to run to her, to scoop her up in my arms the way I used to hold her and never let go. But something stopped me. Some primal instinct, deeper than grief, deeper than love, was screaming that this was wrong. That whatever was walking toward me wearing my daughter's face, wearing her costume, mimicking her movements, it wasn't Emma. "Stop," I said, my voice firmer now. "Stop right there." She stopped. 3 feet away, close enough that I could see her face now, and what I saw made my blood freeze. Her features were Emma's small nose, round cheeks, and the shape of her chin. But her eyes were wrong. They were too dark, too deep, like looking into wells that had no bottom. And her expression was empty, neutral, lacking the warmth and life that had defined my daughter. "What are you?" I whispered. Her mouth opened, and a voice came out. Emma's voice, high and sweet and achingly familiar. "Daddy, don't you recognize?"
Me? You're not my daughter. But I am. I came back, like I promised. A memory surfaced, sharp and painful. The night before that last Halloween, Emma had crawled into my lap while we were carving pumpkins. "Daddy," she'd said, her small hands
"Sticky with pumpkin guts. If something ever happens to me, I'll come back and visit you. I promise. I'll always find you." I'd laughed, kissed her forehead, told her nothing was going to happen to her. Children say things like that. Morbid little thoughts they don't fully understand. I'd forgotten about it until this moment. "Emma."
made that promise, I said slowly. But she can't keep it. She's gone. The thing wearing my daughter's face smiled, and the smile was all wrong, too wide, too knowing.
But I kept it anyway. I came back, just like I said. Behind me, the television went completely dead, plunging the room into deeper darkness. The only light now came from the hallway fixture and the faint glow of streetlights through the windows. In that dimness, I saw something that made my stomach turn. The thing's shadow on the wall behind it was wrong. Emma's costume should have cast a small, child-shaped shadow, but this shadow was large, elongated, with proportions that didn't match. "The figure casting it! Who are you?" I demanded. "What are you?"
"I'm what comes back when children die on Halloween," it said, its voice losing Emma's sweetness, becoming something else, something older and colder. "I'm what slips through when the boundary breaks. I'm the reason you should fear this night."
Took another step forward, and I stumbled backward, my hip hitting the coffee table. "Stay away from me." "But you called me." "Every year you sit here in the dark, thinking about her, wanting her back. Your grief is a beacon. It draws me. It lets me in." The thing tilted its head again, that gesture now seeming insectile, predatory. And tonight, on the anniversary, the door between us was wide enough for me to walk through. I looked at its eyes again, those bottomless dark pits, and understood. This thing wasn't Emma. It had never been Emma. It was something that fed on grief, on loss, on the desperate longing of parents who'd lost children. It wore their faces like masks used.
"Their memories like bait. Get out of my house. I can't. You let me in." When you said her name, when you recognized me, you gave me permission. It smiled again, and I saw that its teeth were wrong, too many, too sharp. Now I stay. Now I wait. And next Halloween, when your grief calls again, I'll come back wearing her face, and the Halloween after that, and the one after that, forever.
I don't remember making the decision to run. My body just moved, propelled by pure survival instinct. I bolted for the front door, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the deadbolt. Behind me, I heard those clicking footsteps following, steady
and unhurried. It didn't need to rush. It knew I couldn't escape.
The deadbolt wouldn't turn. I twisted it, pulled it, my fingers slipping on the metal. It was jammed, stuck, impossible. I ran to the back door. The lock wouldn't budge. I was trapped in my own house with this thing that wore my dead daughter's face. I heard it behind me in the kitchen doorway.
There's no leaving, Daddy. Not tonight.
Tonight I will stay with you.
I keep you company. I fill the empty space she left behind. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer, the largest one I had, and spun around to face it.
Stay back.
I swear to God, stay back. It laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass.
You can't hurt me.
I'm not really here.
Not in the way you understand.
I'm between, neither living nor dead, neither here nor there. I am the space between heartbeats.
The pause between breaths. You can't kill what was never alive. The knife fell from my hands, clattering on the tile floor, because I understood then, with horrible clarity, that it was telling the truth. This wasn't a physical thing I could fight. It was something else. Something that existed in the spaces between reality, feeding on emotion and memory. What do you want from me?
I asked, my voice breaking. I want to be remembered. I want to be seen.
Children who die on Halloween fall through the cracks. They're forgotten, absorbed into the holiday, just another scary story. But if someone remembers them, grieves for them, calls out for them, then we can return. We can wear their faces. We can exist again, even if only for one night a year. You're not Emma. You're using her. You're desecrating her memory. I'm all that's left of her. The echo, the imprint, the last resonance of her existence. It moved closer, and I could smell something now, not Emma's strawberry shampoo, but something organic and wrong. Decay and earth and standing water. You should be grateful. Most parents never get to see their children again, even as echoes. I backed against the counter, my mind racing. There had to be a way to end this, to make it leave. What do I have to do? What do you want?
Stop grieving. Forget her.
Let her go completely. Its smile widened impossibly. But you can.
You'll never let her go.
Which means I'll always be able to come back.
Every Halloween I'll be here.
Wearing her face, speaking with her voice, reminding you of what you lost. The kitchen lights began to flicker, strobing in and out, and in the alternating light and darkness.
I saw the thing's true form flash in and out.
In the light, it was Emma. In the darkness, it was something else, a skeletal figure wrapped in rotting fabric, with hollow eyes and a mouth that opened too wide. Light Emma, dark monster.
Light Emma, dark monster. I squeezed my eyes shut, my hands over my ears, trying to block it out. Please leave. I'll leave when Halloween ends.
When November the 1st comes? But I'll be back next year, and the year after, and the year after. As long as you remember, as long as you grieve.
I have a doorway. I don't know how long I stood there, eyes closed, hands over ears,
listening to that voice cycle between my daughter's sweetness and something ancient and hungry. Time lost meaning. The kitchen could have been any space, any place. I was floating in darkness, anchored only by fear. When I finally opened my eyes, the clock on the microwave read 12:01 a.m., November 1st. Halloween is over. The hallway was empty. The kitchen was empty. The temperature had returned to normal. The lights had stopped flickering. I was alone in my house, really alone, for the first time that night. But on the kitchen floor, where the thing had been standing, was Emma's plastic tiara. The one she'd been wearing that last Halloween. The one that had been buried with her. I want to tell you that was the end of it. That Halloween passed and the haunting ended and I moved on with my life. But that would be a lie, and I've learned that lies have power, especially on Halloween night. Truth is the only protection we have. I moved out of that house 3 weeks later. Sold it at a loss, didn't care. I needed to be somewhere else, somewhere without those memories, without that hallway, where impossible things could stand and watch. I moved to an apartment in the city, a modern building with no history, no past tenants, no accumulated grief weighing down the walls. But it didn't matter, because the thing was right.
As long as I remembered Emma, as long as I carried her memory, it had a doorway.
And on October 31st of the following year, at exactly 10:47 p.m., I heard clicking footsteps in my apartment hallway. I've tried everything. Therapy, medication, even a priest who performed a blessing on my apartment.
Nothing works. Every Halloween at 10:47 p.m. it comes.
Sometimes it stays for minutes, sometimes it stays until midnight, but it always comes wearing Emma's face, speaking with her voice, reminding me that some grief never ends and some doors, once opened, can never fully close. I've learned to prepare for it now.
I mark my calendar. I make sure I'm not alone when it happens.
I invite friends over, keep the lights bright, and play music loud. The thing doesn't manifest as strongly when there are others present. It lurks at the edges, a shadow in peripheral vision, but it can't fully take form. But when I'm alone, when I forget to plan, when isolation catches me unprepared, it's there. Standing at the end of whatever hallway I'm near, wearing that princess costume, clicking those shoes, pointing at me with one small finger. Sometimes I wonder if I should just let go of Emma's memory completely.
Stop thinking about her, stop grieving, stop carrying her picture in my wallet.
Maybe then the door would close. Maybe then October 31st would just be another night. But I can't. She was my daughter. She was real and alive and loved. And even knowing what comes back in her place, even knowing the price of remembrance, I can't let her disappear completely into death. Memory is all I have left of her. However haunted that memory has become, so I live with it. I've become a cartographer of horror, mapping the boundaries of my own grief, learning the rules of this annual haunting.
I know that it can't harm me physically. I know that it feeds on fear and recognition. I know that it leaves when November begins. I know that it will come back every year until I die, and maybe even after. And I know with terrible certainty that I'm not the only one.
There are others like me, parents who lost children on Halloween, who grieve too deeply, who remember too well. And on October 31st, things come back to visit them too. Things that wear beloved faces like masks. Things that slip through the boundary between the living and the dead, between memory and manifestation, between love and horror. This Halloween, when you see a parent standing alone, staring at nothing, flinching at sounds no one else can hear, remember that some of us are seeing more than decorations and costumes. Some of us are seeing the price of grief, the cost of memory, the things that come back when we can't let go. I still carry Emma's picture, but I never look at it on Halloween night. That's the one boundary I've learned to maintain, because the thing feeds on recognition, on the act of remembering, on the moment when memory becomes invocation. The tiara sits in a box in my closet. I've tried to throw it away a dozen times. It always comes back. Objects like memories have their own gravity. Some things can't be discarded no matter how much we want to. Next October 31st at 10:47 p.m., it will happen again.
I'll hear the footsteps. I'll see the small figure at the end of the hallway. I'll hear Emma's voice asking why I don't recognize her.
And I'll do what I always do. I'll close my eyes, I'll wait, and I'll survive until midnight, because that's what Halloween has become for me.
Not a celebration.
Not a holiday. Just a night to survive year after year, forever haunted by the face of my daughter and the thing that wears it. Story 2. It was 9:15 p.m. when the knocking started, and it didn't sound like children. I was house-sitting for my sister in rural Vermont, a favor I'd agreed to without much thought. Rachel had gone on a cruise with her husband, their first vacation without kids in 10 years, and they needed someone to watch the house and feed the cat. It seemed like an easy gig, a week in the countryside, away from my cramped Boston apartment, away from work stress, away from my failing relationship. I brought my laptop, planning to catch up on freelance projects, enjoy the quiet, maybe do some hiking. Halloween fell on the 4th night of my stay.
I hadn't thought much about it.
Rachel's house was at the end of a long dirt road, a quarter-mile from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by forest on 3 sides. No trick-or-treaters would make it out this far. I'd bought a bag of candy anyway, just in case, but I didn't expect to see a single costume. The house was old, built in the 1890s, one of those New England farmhouses with low ceilings and creaking floors and windows that rattled in their frames when the wind picked up. Rachel had modernized her somewhat updated kitchen, new bathroom, internet, but its bones were ancient. It held on to sound strangely. Footsteps echoed. Voices carried. The walls seemed to remember every conversation ever held within them. I'd spent the evening watching horror movies, appropriately enough, with Rachel's cat, Poe, curled up beside me on the couch. The wind had picked up around sunset, whistling through the eaves, making the old house groan and settle. I'd grown accustomed to its sounds over the past few days, the tick of cooling pipes, the creak of floorboards, the rattle of the kitchen window that never quite sealed properly. But this sound was different. It was a knock, deliberate. 3 sharp raps against the front door, heavy, forceful, the kind of knock police make when they're not asking permission. I muted the television and listened. Silence. Just the wind and the creaking house. I checked my phone. 9:15 p.m., late for trick-or-treaters, especially out here. I got up and walked to the front door, flipping on the porch light before opening it. No one was there. The porch was empty, the yard beyond illuminated in a circle of yellow light that faded into darkness. The driveway stretched away, empty, disappearing into the trees. The wind pushed dead leaves across the wooden porch boards, a dry rustling sound that raised the hair on my arms. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish.
Maybe it had been the wind.
Maybe something had blown against the door. I stepped onto the porch, the boards cold under my bare feet, and looked around. Nothing. Movement in the trees, no sounds except the wind. I went back inside, locked the door, and returned to the couch. Poe had moved, I noticed. He was no longer curled up on the cushion, but sitting upright. His attention fixed on the door, his ears forward and alert. "It's just the wind, buddy," I told him. 3 minutes later, the knocking came again. Same rhythm, 3 sharp raps. Same location for the front door. This time, I was faster. I jumped up, crossed the room in 5 long strides, yanked the door open without bothering with the porch light. Empty. No one there.
No footprints in the dust on the porch. No movement in the darkness beyond. This isn't funny. I shouted into the night, my voice swallowed by the wind. "Whoever you are, get the hell off this property!"
The forest stared back at me, silent and dark and unmoved by my anger. I slammed the door, my heart rate elevated now, my previous calm replaced by irritation.
Someone was messing with me.
Probably local teenagers who knew the house was occupied by a stranger, probably thought it would be funny to harass the city person. I grabbed my phone and texted Rachel. "Did you warn the neighbors someone would be staying here?" Having some issues with Halloween pranks. Her response came back almost immediately. "What neighbors?" "The closest house is Morrison Place, a quarter-mile down the road."
They're in their 80s. What kind of pranks?
I stared at her message, my irritation shifting into something else, something that felt more like unease. I texted back, "Someone knocking on the door and running away."
Nobody is there when I answer. That's weird.
"Maybe just kids from town, though it's a long walk from the main road."
Keep doors locked.
"There's a baseball bat in the coat closet if you need it." I found the bat, an old wooden Louisville slugger that had probably been Rachel's husband's from high school. I kept it close as I returned to the couch, but I didn't unmute the television. I sat there in the flickering light from the screen, listening, waiting. 20 minutes passed. Nothing. The house settled into its baseline symphony of old building sounds. Poe relaxed, turning in a circle before curling up again. I started to breathe easier, started to convince myself it had been kids, or wind, or some strange acoustic trick of the old house. Then the knocking came from the back door. 3 sharp raps. Same rhythm, same force. But this time from the opposite end of the house, from the kitchen door that led to the backyard. I grabbed the bat and moved through the house, my socks silent on the hardwood floors. The kitchen was dark. I'd turned off the lights earlier, and the window above the sink showed only blackness. The back door was solid wood, no window, just a deadbolt and a chain lock.
Both were engaged. I stood there, bat raised, breathing hard.
"Who's there?" 3 more knocks, so close. Right on the other side of the door, inches from where I stood. "I have a weapon," I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've called the police." "They're on their way," I hadn't called the police. I hadn't thought to. But whoever was on the other side of that door didn't need to know that. The knocking stopped. I waited, listening with every sense I had. Above the wind, I heard something else. Footsteps, heavy boots on the wooden deck outside the back door, walking around the side of the house. I ran to the kitchen window, pressed my face against the glass, trying to see. The backyard was huge, unfenced, rolling away into darkness and trees.
I couldn't see anyone.
But I could hear those footsteps, moving along the side of the house, crunching through dead leaves.
Heavy and deliberate. They were coming back to the front door. I ran through the house.
Reached the living room just as the knocking started again.
Front door.
3 sharp raps, but this time a voice accompanied it.
Low, male, muffled through the door. Let me in, I froze, the bat clutched in my hands.
Who are you? What do you want?
Let me in. It's cold out here. I don't know you. I'm calling the police. You can't call them.
There's no signal out here. You're alone. The voice was calm, stating facts, not threatening, but somehow worse for its matter-of-factness.
Let me in.
I just want to get warm. I looked at my phone.
He was right. No signal.
I'd been using the house's Wi-Fi for texts, but actual cell service was non-existent out here. Rachel had mentioned that, I remembered now. One of the quirks of rural Vermont, you were on your own once you left the main roads. I'm not opening this door, I said, trying to keep my voice firm. Leave, or I'm driving to town and getting the police. Silence. Then softly, look through the peephole. Every instinct I had screamed not to do it.
Don't look.
Don't get close to the door. Don't engage with whoever is out there. But human curiosity is a powerful thing, and beneath my fear was a desperate need to understand what was happening. I stepped closer to the door, slowly, the bat still raised. I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. The porch light created a circle of illumination, and standing in the center of it was a man, or the shape of a man. He wore old clothes, work pants, a heavy coat, boots that looked handmade. His face was tilted up toward the peephole, and even through the fish-eye distortion, I could see that something was wrong with it. The proportions were off. The eyes were too large, too dark. The mouth was too wide. It was like looking at a person-shaped thing that had learned to mimic humanity, but hadn't quite gotten the details right.
See? The voice said, and I watched the mouth move out of sync with the words. I'm just a man.
Cold and lost. Let me in. No. I backed away from the door, my hands shaking.
No, you need to leave now. I can't leave.
Not until you invite me in. That's the rule. The thing tilted its head, that gesture now familiar and horrible. On Halloween night, the boundary is thin. Things can cross over. But we need permission.
We need an invitation.
Let me in. What happens if I let you in?
Then I can come inside. I can get warm.
I can stay. That too wide mouth spread into something approximating a smile. And next Halloween, I will be waiting inside when you arrive.
And the Halloween after that. And the one after that.
This house will be mine. Every October 31st, I'll be here, wearing whatever face I need to wear to make you open the door. My mind raced through horror movie logic, folklore, anything I'd ever read about supernatural entities. Vampires needed an invitation. Some ghosts needed acknowledgement. Permission was power.
I'll never let you in. You will eventually.
Maybe not tonight, but there are many Halloweens, and I am patient. I'll come back.
Year after year. I'll knock. I'll wait.
And one year, you'll forget to be afraid. You'll get careless. You'll open the door. The thing pressed its face closer to the peephole, and I could see details now that made my stomach turn. The texture of its skin was wrong, more like bark than flesh. I've been coming to this house for a long time, decades. The last family that lived here, they let me in eventually. The wife thought I was her husband returning from town. She opened the door, and I walked right inside. What happened to them? They don't live here anymore. I remembered Rachel mentioning that the previous owners had sold suddenly without explanation, leaving most of their furniture behind. Below market value, she'd said. Like they couldn't wait to get rid of it. The knocking started again, but this time it was coming from multiple locations. The front door, the back door, the windows, the walls themselves. 3 sharp raps, over and over, a rhythm that filled the entire house, making it impossible to think, impossible to focus on anything except the sound. "Stop!"
I shouted, my hands over my ears. "Stop it!"
The knocking stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard that voice again, but now it was coming from everywhere at once, surrounding me. "Let me in, let me in."
I ran to the coat closet, grabbed my jacket and my car keys. I needed to get out.
I needed to leave this house, drive to town, find help, find sanity. I moved toward the front door, then stopped. The thing was still out there. If I opened the door, would that count as an invitation? Would it be able to come inside? I ran to the back door instead, my hands fumbling with the deadbolt. I'd go out the back, around the side of the house, get to my car in the driveway. The deadbolt wouldn't move. I twisted it, pulled it, my fingers slipping on the metal. It was jammed, stuck, just like in my first story. No, that hadn't happened to me. That had happened to David, but it is happening now too. The same trap, the same inability to escape. I was mixing reality with something else, I realized. The boundaries in this house were blurring. Past and present, story and experience, all bleeding together. Focus. I forced myself to breathe, to think clearly. This was real.
This was happening. I needed to survive until morning.
Until November 1st. Until Halloween was over and whatever rules governed this thing would no longer apply. I backed away from the kitchen door and returned to the living room. Poe was gone.
I hadn't noticed him leave. Smart cat.
He'd probably found somewhere to hide, somewhere small and safe. I grabbed my phone and opened the Wi-Fi connection.
Still working. I could text Rachel. Something is outside the house. Knocking. Won't leave.
Says I need to invite it in. What is this place? I waited, watching the screen.
1 minute, 2, then her response. Get out.
Don't invite anything in. There's a history we didn't tell you. The previous owners said the house was haunted.
We thought they were crazy. Get out now. The doors won't open. I'm trapped. Windows.
Break them if you have to. Just get out. I looked at the living room windows.
Large, old, the glass thick and wavy with age.
I grabbed a chair and swung it at the nearest one. It bounced off, the wood of the chair splintering, the window unmarked. I tried again. Same result. It was like trying to break bulletproof glass with a toothpick. Windows won't break, I texted. Her response took longer this time. Then stay inside.
Don't open any doors.
Don't invite anything in. Wait until morning. We're trying to reach the police, but service is terrible. Hang on. I set my phone down and looked at the door.
I couldn't see through the peephole from here.
But I knew the thing was still out there. Waiting, patient, playing a game where it knew all the rules. And I was learning them moment by moment. "I know you're frightened," the voice said, softer now, almost kind. "But I don't want to hurt you."
I just want shelter. It's Halloween.
The boundaries open. Things like me were cold. We're tired. We've been walking for so long.
All I want is a place to rest. There was something seductive in that voice, something that pulled at a deep-seated human instinct to help, to show compassion. I found myself taking a step toward the door before I caught myself. "No," I said firmly.
"You're lying. You don't want shelter. You want something else?" "I want what all forgotten things want. To be remembered, to be seen, to exist again, even if only for one night a year." The voice was closer now, like the thing had pressed itself against the door, its mouth near the crack between door and frame. "This house remembers me. I died here long ago, before it was a farmhouse, when it was just land and trees. I died in the cold, in the dark, and my bones went into the ground where this house now stands.
Every Halloween I can almost return.
Almost take form, but I need permission.
I need an invitation. I need someone to open the door. What happens if I open it? I come inside. I walk these halls again. I remember what it was to be warm, to be alive. And the house.
It remembers too. It lets me stay. Every Halloween after, this becomes my space as much as yours. We share it. The living and the dead, existing side by side, the boundary between us forever blurred. And what about the people who live here? What happens to them? Silence.
Then they change, slowly, year by year.
They start to see things, hear things. The boundary gets thinner for them too. They start to exist in both worlds, neither fully alive nor fully dead. Eventually, they don't know which side they belong to anymore. I thought of the previous owners, the sudden sale. The furniture was left behind. The fact that Rachel had gotten such a good deal on a house that should have been worth 3 times what she paid. That's what happened to them, I said, understanding now. The family before. They let you in? The wife did. One Halloween, she was lonely. Her husband traveled for work. Her children had grown and moved away. She was here alone, and when I knocked, she was grateful for the company. She invited me in. We talked all night. She made me tea. She showed me photographs. And when morning came and I faded back into whatever space I usually occupy, she remembered. She told her husband. He didn't believe her. But the next Halloween, I came back, and she let me in again.
And again.
And every year she slipped further away from the living world, toward mine. Her husband saw the change.
He insisted they'd leave, and they did.
But I'm still here, waiting in the walls, in the foundation, in the bones of this house. My sister owns this house now, with her family.
I know.
I've seen them. The children especially. They're young, innocent. The boundary is already thin for children. They see what adults have learned to ignore. The sister's daughter, the youngest one, sees me sometimes. In the hallway, in her bedroom doorway. She tells her parents, and they say she's imagining things. But she's not. She knows I'm here. A cold horror settled over me. Rachel's youngest daughter, wait, not Emma. That was the name from the first story again. Rachel's daughter was Sophie, 6 years old. She'd been having nightmares, Rachel had mentioned, waking up screaming about the man in the hall. They'd assumed it was just dreams, childhood fears. You stay away from her, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You stay away from those children. I don't choose who sees me.
I just exist.
But if you let me in tonight, if you give me permission, then I'll have more form, more substance. Then I can interact more. Then I can become part of this house in ways I haven't been able to before. The voice was changing now, becoming eager, hungry. Let me in.
Give me that gift. Help me remember what it was to be human.
I looked at the door, at the deadbolt, at the thin barrier of wood between me and this thing. Every instinct told me to run, to escape, to get as far from this house as possible.
But I couldn't. I was trapped.
And in the absence of escape, I had only one defense: refusal. No, I said clearly. I don't invite you in. I don't grant you permission.
You're not welcome here. Not tonight.
Not ever. The response was immediate and violent. The knocking started again, but now it was deafening, coming from every surface at once. The doors, the windows, the walls, the floor beneath my feet, the ceiling above my head. 3 sharp raps over and over, a rhythm that shook the entire house. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped until I could see my breath. Frost spread across the windows in intricate patterns. I stood in the center of the living room, the baseball bat clutched in my hands. And I endured. There was nothing else to do.
I couldn't fight. I couldn't flee.
I could only wait and refuse and hope that morning would come before I broke. The knocking continued for what felt like hours. My sense of time dissolved. I stopped checking my phone, stopped looking at the clock. There was only the sound, the cold, and my own determination not to give in. My hands grew numb around the bat. My feet ached from standing. My whole body shook, whether from cold or fear I couldn't tell. And then, gradually, the knocking began to slow. The rhythm stretched out. 3 raps.
Long pause.
3 raps. Longer pause. The intensity decreased. The cold started to lift. The lights steadied. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands. 12:03 a.m., November 1st. Halloween is over. The knocking stopped completely. The house fell silent, except for its normal creaking and settling. I stood there for another 10 minutes, not trusting the silence, waiting for it to start again. But nothing happened. The thing, whatever it was, had retreated. I walked slowly to the front door and looked through the peephole. The porch was empty. I unlocked the door, opened it slightly, peered out. Nothing. No one. Just the night, the wind, the darkness of rural Vermont. I stepped outside onto the porch, and that's when I saw them. Footprints. Dozens of them.
All around the house in the dust and the dead leaves.
Boot prints, all the same size, all the same depth, circling the house over and over. Like something had walked around it for hours, wearing a path in the earth. But what made me step back, what made my breath catch, was the direction of the prints. They all pointed inward.
Toward the house.
Like whatever had made them had been walking backward the entire time, its face always toward the walls, always watching, always waiting for an invitation that never came. I left that house at dawn, threw my things in my car, didn't bother cleaning up, didn't wait for Rachel to return from her cruise. I texted her from the road. Something happened.
I'm sorry. I had to leave.
I'll explain later. Her response came hours later after I was safely back in my Boston apartment. The neighbors found Poe. He was hiding in their barn. He won't come back to the house.
What happened?
I told her everything. The knocking, the voice. The thing that claimed it had died on that land long ago and now returned every Halloween-seeking invitation. I expected her not to believe me.
I expected dismissal, concern for my mental health, and logical explanations. Instead, she wrote, I believe you.
Sophie has been talking about the man in the hall for months. We thought it was nightmares.
But maybe it wasn't. We're selling the house. I don't care what we lose on it. We're getting my children out of there. They listed it in December.
It sold eventually to a young couple from New York looking for a rural retreat. Rachel tried to warn them, tried to mention the previous owner's complaints about the house being haunted. They laughed it off.
Old house, they said. Character, charm, history. They loved all of that. I wonder if they still love it. I wonder if they survived their first Halloween there.
I wonder if, when the knocking started, they were smart enough to refuse, or if they made the mistake of answering, of inviting, of breaking that final boundary between the living and the dead, because that's what I learned that night in Vermont. That some places hold on to their dead, that some deaths create permanent scars in the fabric of reality, and that on Halloween, when the boundary is thinnest, those scars can open up. The dead can reach through. They can knock on doors. They can ask for permission, and if you give it to them, if you invite them in, they never truly leave. They become part of the structure, woven into the wood and stone, waiting for the next October 31st when they can manifest again, when they can knock again, when they can ask another living person to blur the line between life and death. I'll never house sit again on Halloween. I'll never spend that night anywhere but my own apartment in a building built in 2015, with no history, no deaths, no accumulated grief weighing down its walls. Because I know now that some invitations once extended can never be revoked, and some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. The thing is still out there in that Vermont farmhouse, waiting in the walls, waiting in the foundation, waiting for Halloween to come around again, waiting for someone to open the door. I just hope whoever
lives there now is smarter than to answer when it
Story. Number 3, it was 8:30 p.m. when I realized the trick-or-treaters were all the same child, but no. One else seemed to notice I was working. The door at a friend's Halloween party in downtown Seattle, one of those massive affairs in a converted warehouse where everyone who was anyone in the tech scene showed up in elaborate costumes, drinks in hand, ready to see and be seen. My friend Marcus, a different Marcus than the one from the corn maze, though the coincidence of names still bothers me, had hired me as part of the security team for the night.
Easy money, he'd said.
Just check IDs at the door, keep out crashers, make sure no one gets too drunk and causes problems. The party was in full swing by 8. 300 people packed into the space, music pounding, lights strobing, the air thick with artificial fog and expensive cologne. I stood at the entrance with my clipboard and guest list, checking names, collecting coats, directing people to the bar. Standard stuff, but around 8:30 I started noticing something weird. A kid kept coming to the door.
Same kid, over and over.
He couldn't have been more than 10, dressed in a simple ghost costume, white sheet, holes cut for eyes, classic and lazy. But it was Halloween, and there were families in the neighborhood, so occasional trick-or-treaters weren't unusual. I'd turned away a dozen kids already, explaining that this was a private party, not a house giving out candy. This kid was different. He didn't ask for candy. He just stood there, outside the glass door, staring in at me through those eye holes. After a moment, he'd turn and walk away, disappearing into the crowd of people on the street. Then 10 minutes later, he'd be back.
Same position.
Same staring. The third time it happened, I opened the door.
Hey, kid.
Do you need something?
Are you lost?
He didn't respond, just tilted his head slightly, that gesture I'd come to associate with things that weren't quite human, and continued staring. Where are your parents?
I asked, stepping outside, looking around.
The street was busy with Halloween foot traffic, adults in costumes heading to parties, groups of kids with parents trailing behind, the usual urban October 31st chaos.
You shouldn't be out here alone. The kid turned and walked away, disappearing into a group of people passing by.
I watched for a moment, then shrugged it off and went back inside.
Probably just a kid being weird.
Halloween brought out the strange in everyone, but he came back.
Again and again.
Every 10 minutes, like clockwork, the kid in the ghost costume would appear outside the door, stand there staring for 30 seconds to a minute, then leave. By the fifth occurrence, I was starting to feel uncomfortable. By the seventh, I was actively disturbed. Marcus, I said, pulling my friend aside during one of his circuits through the party. There's a kid outside. In a ghost costume? He keeps coming back, just standing there, staring. It's weird. Marcus glanced toward the door. What kid? Right there. Outside? I pointed. The kid was back, in his usual position, white sheet glowing under the streetlights. Marcus looked.
I don't see anyone. He's right there, man.
The ghost costume, white sheet.
Right outside the door. Dude, I think you need a drink. There's no one there. Marcus laughed and clapped me on the shoulder.
Occupational hazard of working the door, you start seeing things. Take a break. Get some food. I'll have someone to cover for you. I looked back at the door. The kid was still there.
I could see him clearly.
But Marcus genuinely didn't seem to, which meant either Marcus was messing with me or something very strange was happening. I'm fine, I said.
Keep an eye out for a kid in a ghost costume, okay?
Make sure he's not alone out there. Sure thing. Marcus wandered off, absorbed back into the party, and I returned to my post at the door. The kid appeared again at 8:50 p.m. This time he raised one hand, small, pale, emerging from under the sheet and pointed at me. Direct, unmistakable. His finger aimed at my chest like he was marking me.
Identifying me, singling me out for something. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air every time the door opened. This wasn't right.
This wasn't normal. 10-year-olds didn't stand outside parties pointing at security guards for 2 hours straight. 10-year-olds had attention spans measured in minutes, not the inexhaustible patience this kid was demonstrating. I pulled out my phone and texted Marcus. I'm serious about the kid.
Can you check the security cameras?
See if you can see what I'm seeing. His response came back quickly. Checked. No kid on any camera angle.
Are you feeling okay?
Carbon monoxide?
Bad sushi.
I looked at the door. The kid was gone for the moment. I walked outside into the cool night air and examined the spot where he'd been standing. The sidewalk was concrete, damp from an earlier rain. I could see footprints everywhere, boots, heels, sneakers, the chaotic overlay of a busy urban Halloween. But in the exact spot where the kid had been standing, there were no footprints at all. The concrete was clean, dry, as if nothing had touched it in hours. I backed away, my mind racing through possibilities. Hallucination, stress, exhaustion. I'd been working long hours at my day job, pulling double shifts to save money.
Maybe I was more worn down than I'd realized.
Maybe my brain was playing tricks, but the image of the kid was so clear, so solid. I could see details of the weave of the sheet, a small tear near the hem, the scuffed toes of sneakers visible beneath the costume. That level of detail didn't feel like hallucination. I went back inside, returned to my post, and tried to focus on the job. Check IDs, cross off names, smile, repeat. Normal tasks to ground myself in normal reality. At 9 p.m. the kid appeared again. But this time he wasn't alone. There were 5 of them now. All children, all wearing identical white sheet ghost costumes, all standing in a line outside the door, all pointing at me. My blood went cold.
I stared at them and they stared back through those crude eye holes. None of them moved.
None of them blinked, though I couldn't actually see their eyes. I somehow knew they weren't blinking. They just stood there, 5 identical figures, their arms raised, their fingers extended, marking me. I grabbed the nearest partygoer, a woman dressed as a witch.
Did you see those kids outside?
She glanced at the door. What kids? Right there. The ghost costumes?
5 of them.
She looked at me with concern.
Honey, there's no one out there. Are you okay? You look really pale. I let her go, muttered an apology and stared at the door.
The kids were still visible to me, clear as day, but no one else could see them, which meant either I was having a very specific, very detailed hallucination, supernatural was happening. Given that it was Halloween, given everything I knew about this night, I was starting to suspect the latter. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd never done before. I Googled, "Seeing Ghost Children Halloween." The results were surprisingly extensive. Folklore from dozens of cultures mentioned spirits of dead children returning on Halloween, All Saints' Day, Dia de los Muertos, children who died young, whose deaths were violent or untimely, who hadn't received proper burial or acknowledgement. One article from a paranormal research site I'd normally dismiss as nonsense caught my attention. Children who died on Halloween night often remain tethered to that date. They appear to those who share a connection, usually people who've experienced their own losses on October 31st. They're not typically malevolent, but they are persistent. They want to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have their existence confirmed. I stopped reading. My hands had started shaking. I had lost someone on Halloween.
7 years ago.
My younger brother Danny. He'd been 15, dressed as a zombie, heading to a party with friends. A drunk driver. Instant. The same story that played out every Halloween somewhere. Someone dying meaninglessly. Their future erased by someone else's poor choice. I'd been 21 then. The grief had nearly destroyed me. I'd spent years in therapy, working through the guilt, the anger, the sense that I should have somehow prevented it, even though I'd been in another state at the time.
I thought I'd made peace with it. Thought I'd move on. Apparently I hadn't moved on enough. Something new.
Something remembered. I looked back at the door. There were 10 children now, all in ghost costumes, all pointing. "What do you want?" I whispered, not caring if anyone heard me talking to empty air. The children didn't respond. They just stood there, their numbers growing every time I looked away and back. 10 became 15, became 20.
All identical.
All pointing. At 9:30 p.m. I abandoned my post.
I couldn't take it anymore.
The sight of those children, the weight of their collective gaze, the pointing fingers, it was crushing me.
I pushed through the party, found Marcus and grabbed his arm. I need to leave. I'm sorry.
Something's wrong.
I can't explain it, but I need to go. Marcus looked at me with genuine concern.
Man, you really don't look good. Yeah, go, get some rest. I'll cover the door. Do you need a ride?
No, I'll walk. I need air. I grabbed my jacket and left through the back exit, not wanting to pass those children, not wanting to face those pointing fingers.
The alley behind the warehouse was dark, lit by a single security light, filled with dumpsters and the smell of rotting food. I leaned against the brick wall, breathing hard, trying to process what was happening. That's when I heard the voice, small, young, coming from the darkness further down the alley. "You can see us." I turned, slowly. At the far end of the alley, barely visible in the dim light, was one of the children. Ghost costume,
White sheet.
But this one had pulled back the sheet slightly, revealing a face underneath. A boy, maybe 12, pale skin, dark eyes, an expression of desperate hope. "You're the first person in a long time who can see us," he said, walking slowly toward me. "We've been trying to be visible, trying to get someone's attention, but most people look right through us."
"But you can see us. Why?" "I don't know," I managed.
"Why are you following me?"
"Because we recognize you. You're like us."
"You've been touched by Halloween death."
"Your brother." My chest tightened.
"How do you know about my brother?" "We all know. We're all the same. Children who died on Halloween. We're stuck here in this one night, trying to be remembered, trying to matter." The boy stopped a few feet away. Up close, I could see that he wasn't quite solid. I could see the alley wall through him faintly, like looking through foggy glass. "My name was Tyler. I died 12 years ago, hit by a car while trick-or-treating. I was 8. I'm sorry," I said automatically.
"Everyone's sorry."
"But sorry doesn't help us. We need something else." Other children were appearing now, emerging from the shadows, surrounding me. All of them had pulled back their sheets slightly, revealing young faces. Boys and girls, different ages, different eras based on their clothes. But all of them died.
All of them trapped.
We need to be seen, really seen, acknowledged, remembered. That's all ghosts really want.
To not be forgotten.
To not be nothing. I looked at their faces, at the hope and desperation there, and felt something crack open in my chest. These were children. Whatever they were now, they'd been children once. They'd had lives, futures, possibilities, and all of it had been stolen on one night, a night that was supposed to be fun, harmless, a celebration. "I see you," I said quietly.
"Oh, I see all of you. Say our names," Tyler said.
"If you can see us, you can hear them. Listen." I listened, and somehow, impossibly, I could hear them. Not with my ears, but with something deeper. Names whispered in the back of my mind, each one a small plea for recognition. "Tyler," I said, looking at the boy who'd spoken. He smiled, and for a moment he looked more solid, more real. "Jessica," I said, turning to a girl in a princess costume similar to Emma's from the first story. She nodded, tears streaming down her translucent cheeks. "Michael, Brittany, Aaron, Sophie, Christopher." I went through them, one by one, speaking their names aloud, acknowledging their existence. With each name, the children became slightly more visible, slightly more present. The act of being seen, of being named, was giving them something they'd been denied for years. When I'd named them all, 23 children, 23 lives cut short, Tyler spoke again. "Thank you. Most people can't hear us.
Can't see us."
They've learned to ignore the supernatural, to explain it away. But you haven't. You're open to it because you've experienced it. Your grief left you vulnerable. It created a crack in your certainty. And through that crack, we can reach you. What happens now?"
I asked. "Now we wait for next Halloween. And the one after that?"
"We're tied to this night. We can't move on.
"We can't rest."
We just exist in this one moment, repeating every year, hoping someone will see us, will speak our names, and will confirm that we were real." "That's horrific." "That's Halloween," Tyler said simply. "For most people, it's costumes and candy. For us, it's the entire universe. The only time we exist. The only time we're possible." I thought about my brother Danny, about whether he was like these children, trapped in the moment of his death, returning every October 31st to a world that had moved on without him.
The thought made me want to scream. "Is my brother here?"
"With you? Can you see him?" Tyler shook his head. "I don't know.
There are so many of us."
Halloween deaths going back centuries. We don't all know each other. We're scattered, each trapped in our own moment, our own location. He might be, or he might have found peace. Some do somehow. We don't know what determines who stays and who moves on. The children started to fade, becoming less substantial, their edges blurring. Tyler looked down at himself, at his hands becoming transparent. "We're running out of time. Halloween is ending soon. We'll disappear back into whatever space we occupy between Halloween. But thank you for seeing us. Thank you for saying our names. It helps. It makes us feel less forgotten." "Wait," I said desperately. "Is there a way to help you?"
"To free you. If there is, we haven't found it."
We've tried everything. We've tried moving on, letting go, forgiving, accepting. Nothing works. Halloween death is a trap we can't escape. Tyler was almost completely transparent now. Maybe there's no escape. Maybe we're just meant to haunt this night forever. A reminder that death comes even on holidays. That tragedy doesn't respect celebration. I'll remember you, I promised. All of you. I'll write down your names. I'll tell people about you. You won't be forgotten. Tyler smiled one last time. That's all we wanted, to be remembered. Thank you. And then they were gone. All of them. Vanished like smoke, leaving only the dark alley and the distant sounds of the party continuing inside. I stood there alone, my phone in my hand, and I typed out their names as quickly as I could remember them. 23 children, 23 lives, 23 deaths that had occurred on Halloween nights going back decades. I kept that list.
I still have it.
Every year on October 31st, I read those names aloud. It's become a ritual, my own private memorial for children no one else remembers, whose deaths were absorbed into the holiday, who became just another spooky story instead of being seen as the tragedies they were. And every year, at 8:30 p.m., I see them again. They appear wherever I am outside my apartment, in my peripheral vision, reflected in windows. They don't point anymore. They just stand there in their white sheet costumes, watching, making sure I keep my promise, making sure I remember I started researching Halloween deaths after that night. News articles, historical records, local legends. The number is staggering. Hundreds of children die every October 31st. Car accidents mostly, but also falls, drownings, poisonings, freak accidents. Halloween is statistically one of the most dangerous days of the year for children. Though most people don't know that. All those deaths, all that grief, all those families whose celebrations turned to tragedy in an instant. And some portion of those children never move on. They become trapped in the holiday that killed them, returning every year, desperate to be seen, to be acknowledged, to matter. Most people can't see them. Most people have trained themselves out of that perception. But those of us who've been touched by Halloween death, who carry that specific grief, we're different. We're open to it. We can't help but see them. So if you're reading this, if you've lost someone on Halloween, if you carry that particular pain, be prepared. On October 31st, they might come to you too. Not just your lost loved one, but all of them. All the forgotten children, all the Halloween dead, all the ghosts trapped in that one night. And if they do come, if you see them standing in their costumes, their hands raised, their fingers pointing, don't run, don't look away, don't pretend they're not there, see them, acknowledge them. If you can, learn their names, speak those names aloud, because being seen, being remembered, being acknowledged, that's all any ghost really wants. It won't free them. It won't end their haunting. But it will give them something they've been denied, the confirmation that they existed, that they mattered, that their deaths were not meaningless. It's a small thing. But on Halloween, when the dead press close to the living, when the boundary blurs and the impossible becomes possible, sometimes small things are all we can offer. I still attend Halloween parties sometimes. I still work security occasionally. But I'm never surprised anymore when I see children in ghost costumes standing outside, watching, pointing.
I know what they are.
I know what they want, and every year, without fail, I give it to them.
I see them. I remember them.
I speak their names into the darkness, a prayer for the forgotten dead, a memorial for those who can never have proper burial, because someone has to remember.
Someone has to see. And if that burden falls to those of us who've lost someone on October 31st, then I'll carry it willingly. It's the least I can do for them.
For Danny, for all the Halloween dead who haunt this night, desperate not to be forgotten, desperate to matter, desperate simply to be seen. Story. Numbered for it was 11:45 p.m. when the candy bowl refilled itself, and I realized I hadn't bought any candy. I was in my apartment in Chicago, alone on Halloween night, grateful the holiday was almost over. I'd moved here 6 months earlier for a new job, a fresh start in a city where I knew no one, where I could reinvent myself away from the judgments and expectations of my hometown. The apartment was a studio in an old building in Wicker Park, cheap rent for a reason. The place was ancient, poorly maintained, with pipes that groaned and radiators that banged and neighbors whose arguments came clearly through the thin walls. But it was mine, my space, my refuge. I'd ignored Halloween almost entirely.
No decorations, no costuming.
I'd picked up a late shift at work specifically to avoid being home during the peak trick-or-treating hours. By the time I got back to my apartment at 10:30, the streets were mostly clear, the holiday winding down. I'd changed into sweats, ordered takeout, and settled in to watch television until midnight, until I could officially declare Halloween over for another year. I'd never liked the holiday. Even as a child, something about it felt wrong to me. The deliberate courting of fear, the celebration of death and darkness, the thin veneer of fun barely concealing something ancient and troubling beneath. My parents had tried to get me into costumes, trick-or-treating, haunted houses, but I'd always resisted. As an adult, I'd made peace with simply opting out. The candy bowl had been sitting on my coffee table when I came home. I'd noticed it vaguely, assumed it had been there before I left for work, and I'd just forgotten about it. A simple ceramic bowl, white with orange jack-o'-lanterns painted around the rim, filled with fun-size candy bars, Snickers, Kit Kats, Milky Ways, the usual Halloween fare. I'd grabbed a Snickers around 11, eating it while scrolling through my phone. The bowl had been about half full. I'd thought nothing of it. But now, at 11:45 p.m., I glanced over and saw that the bowl was completely full, heaping with candy more than it could reasonably hold, bars stacked on top of each other, like someone had just filled it to overflowing. I stared at it, my takeout forgotten in my lap.
I lived alone. No one had been in my apartment.
The door had been locked when I came home, and I hadn't heard it open since. My apartment was on the 4th floor, and while I had a fire escape outside my window, it was old and rusted and would have made tremendous noise if anyone climbed it. So how did the candy bowl refill itself? I set down my food and walked over to the coffee table, looking at the bowl more carefully. The candy looked
Actual wrapped chocolate bars with proper logos and packaging.
I picked one up. It felt real, had weight, and seemed entirely normal, but I hadn't bought any candy.
I was certain of that.
I'd specifically not bought candy because I didn't want to encourage trick-or-treaters and didn't want to participate in the holiday at all. So where did this bowl come from? I pulled out my phone and texted my landlord. "Did you put a candy bowl in my apartment?"
No response.
It was almost midnight on Halloween. He was probably asleep or out at a party or simply not checking his phone. I looked around my apartment. Everything else seemed normal. My laptop was on the desk where I'd left it. My keys were by the door. My jacket hung on its hook. Nothing was disturbed, nothing was out of place except for this bowl of candy that shouldn't exist. Maybe I was misremembering. Maybe I had bought candy weeks ago and forgotten about it. Maybe the bowl had been a housewarming gift from a neighbor that I'd somehow completely erased from my memory. Memory was fallible. Memory played tricks. I picked up the bowl, intending to dump the candy in the trash, to get rid of this weird anomaly.
As I lifted it, something fell out from underneath.
A piece of paper folded once, yellowed with age. I set the bowl down and unfolded the paper. It was old, the edges crumbling slightly, the fold lines worn. The handwriting was in pencil, faded but still legible. "To whoever lives here now, I'm sorry.
I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't know it would stay. Please forgive me. Please help them. Margaret, 1982, the date made my blood run cold."
1982, 40 years ago. This note had been hidden under the candy bowl for 4 decades, and I'd somehow found it tonight. I looked at the bowl again, at the ceramic painted with jack-o'-lanterns, and recognized it now for what it was, old. Not a modern, mass-produced item, but something vintage, hand-painted, from an era when Halloween decorations were different. This bowl had been around for decades, and it was in my apartment. I grabbed my laptop and started researching the building's history. It took some digging. The building's website was sparse, and most official records required fees to access, but I finally found something in a Chicago Tribune archive. An article from November 2nd, 1982 tragic Halloween accident claims 3 children died on Halloween night when a fire broke out in an apartment building in Wicker Park. The victims, ages 8, 10 and 11, were trapped on the 4th floor when the blaze started. Witnesses reported seeing the children at a window, but by the time firefighters arrived, it was too late. The cause of the fire is under investigation, though preliminary reports suggest it may have started in an apartment kitchen. The building owner and residents are cooperating with authorities. I read the article 3 times, my hands shaking.
4th floor.
My apartment was on the 4th floor. 1982, the same year as the note. I searched for more information, found a follow-up article from a week later. The fire had started in apartment 4C, my apartment. A resident named Margaret Chen had been home alone, fallen asleep while cooking, and left a pot on the stove. The pot had caught fire, the fire had spread, and smoke had filled the upper floors.
Margaret had survived.
3 children from other apartments hadn't Margaret Chen lived in my apartment, had accidentally started a fire that killed 3 children, had written a note apologizing, asking for forgiveness, asking for help, and now, 40 years later, that note had appeared under a candy bowl that shouldn't exist. I looked at my kitchen, at the stove I used every day. 3 children had died because of a fire that started right there, on that spot, 40 years ago on Halloween night. The candy bowl began to glow. Not bright, just a faint luminescence like the ceramic itself was emitting light. The painted jack-o'-lanterns seemed to flicker, their carved faces moving subtly, expressions changing from cheerful to sinister. I backed away from the coffee table, my heart hammering.
This isn't real.
This isn't happening. A sound came from the bowl, rustling, like small hands digging through candy, searching for their favorite pieces. I could see movement now. The candy bars were shifting, being pushed aside by invisible fingers. Hello? My voice was barely a whisper. Is someone there? 3 pieces of candy rose from the bowl. They hovered in the air for a moment, suspended by nothing, then floated towards me, slowly, deliberately, each one stopping a few feet away. At approximately child height. You can see us, a voice said. Young, maybe 10 years old.
Coming from where one of the floating candy bars hovered.
We've been waiting so long for someone who can see us. 2 more voices joined in, slightly different ages, slightly different tones. We've been here since the fire. Trapped in this apartment. We come back every Halloween hoping someone will help us. Help you do what?
I managed. Get our candy! The statement was so mundane, so childlike, that it cut through my terror.
These were children. Dead children, yes. Children trapped as ghosts, but children nonetheless. And on the night they died, they'd been trick-or-treating. They'd been collecting candy, enjoying Halloween, doing what children do. You want candy? I asked carefully. We never got our candy that year. We died before we could eat it. Our parents collected it from our bodies, saved it, but we never got to have it. We've been waiting. Every Halloween, we wait for someone to give us candy. The floating candy bars moved closer, and I could see now that they weren't being held by anything visible. They just floated, marking the position of 3 invisible children. Margaret left the bowl, another voice said.
After the fire, after everything.
She felt so guilty. She wanted to give us something to make up for what happened. So she left the bowl with candy. She left a note. She hoped someone would understand and would continue what she started, would give us what we never got to have. I looked at the bowl, at the overflowing candy, and understood. This wasn't haunting in the traditional sense. This was a ritual started 40 years ago by a guilt-stricken woman meant to give 3 dead children the Halloween they'd been denied.
How many people have lived here since Margaret? I asked. Lots. Most of them never saw us, never understood.
They'd throw away the bowl or the candy or just ignore it. But the bowl always comes back.
Margaret bound it to this space somehow.
And every Halloween, it is filled with candy, an offering for us. I reached out slowly and took one of the floating candy bars. It was solid, real, a Snickers in its brown wrapper. I unwrapped it carefully and broke it in half. Here, this is for you. The candy bar I was holding vanished from my hand.
I heard the sound of chewing, of a child eating chocolate and caramel and peanuts. Thank you, the voice said, filled with genuine joy.
Thank you so much. I spent the next 15 minutes breaking open candy bars and watching them disappear. 3 invisible children eating Halloween candy in my apartment, grateful for something as simple as chocolate. They chatted while they ate, telling me about their Halloween 40 years ago, about their costumes, a vampire, a witch, a superhero, about the houses they'd visited, the candy they'd collected. We were going to trade after, one of them said. I had 3 Twix bars and Marcus wanted them, and he had peanut butter cups, which I wanted. We were going to negotiate. We never got to, another voice added sadly. We never got to sort it out or eat any of it or do any of the fun parts.
We just stopped. At 11:59 p.m., the voices began to fade.
The candy bars I held stopped disappearing. The glow from the bowl dimmed. We have to go now, the first voice said. Halloween is ending. We only exist during the holiday, but thank you for seeing us. Thank you for the candy. Will you come back? I asked. Next year? We always come back. We're tied to this date, this place. If you're still here next Halloween, we'll be here too. And if you leave the candy, if you remember us, we'd be grateful. I'll remember, I promised. I'll make sure the bowl is full. Thank you, they said in unison. And then they were gone, and it was midnight, and Halloween was officially over. The candy bowl was empty now, except for wrappers, evidence of what had just occurred.
I gathered them up carefully, and as I did, I noticed something.
Each wrapper had a small detail I hadn't seen before, a name written in faded pencil. Marcus, Jennifer, Sophie, the 3 children who died in the fire. Their names written on candy wrappers, a memorial in chocolate and paper. I saved those wrappers. I keep them in a box with the note from Margaret, physical proof that what happened was real.
And every year on October 31st, I buy candy, the good stuff.
The chocolate bars kids actually want, and I fill that ceramic bowl with jack-o'-lanterns painted on the rim. At 11:45 p.m., I set it on my coffee table and wait. And at 11:46 it begins to glow, and the candy starts to disappear, piece by piece, taken by invisible hands, consumed by children who've been dead for 40 years but still love Halloween, still want trick or treat, still deserve to have their candy. I've learned that hauntings aren't always malevolent. Sometimes they're just sad. Sometimes they're just unfinished business, wishes left unfulfilled, needs left unmet. 3 children died on Halloween before they could enjoy their candy. So they wait year after year for someone to finally give them what they should have had. It's a small thing.
Leaving out a bowl of candy, making sure it's full.
Staying up until midnight to bear witness. But for Marcus and Jennifer and Sophie, 3 names I speak aloud every October 31st. It's everything. It's Halloween they were denied. It's the childhood joy death stole from them. I don't live alone in this apartment anymore. I live with 3 ghosts who appear once a year, who eat candy and tell me about their costumes and remind me that some spirits don't want to terrify the living. They just want to be children again, even if only for one night. Even if only in the 15 minutes before midnight, when Halloween still holds sway. Next time you see a bowl of candy left out after Halloween is over, sitting on a table or a porch, full long after it should have been emptied, consider that it might not be forgotten. It might be intentional. It might be an offering for the dead, a memorial for children who never got their Halloween. And if you see candy disappearing from that bowl, taken by invisible hands, don't be afraid. Just know that somewhere, in whatever space ghosts occupy between their annual returns, 3 children are smiling because someone remembered.
Someone saw them.
Someone gave them their candy, and really, that's all any ghost wants. To be remembered, to be seen, to matter enough that the living makes space for the dead, even if only for one night a year. I still don't like Halloween, but I understand it now in a way I didn't before. It's not just costumes and parties. It's a boundary, a threshold, a night when the dead press close to the living, when grief manifests, when old debts come due, and for those of us who've learned to see, who've learned to listen, who've learned that the supernatural is simply the natural we haven't yet explained. Halloween is the night we fulfill our obligations to the forgotten dead. So this October 31st, leave out some candy. You never know who might need it. You never know what children might be waiting year after year for someone to finally see them and offer them the simple joy of trick-or-treating. It's the least we can do.
For them, for all of them.
For every Halloween death that gets absorbed into the holiday, forgotten, treated as just another spooky story instead of the tragedy it was. Remember them. See them. Give them their candy, because some hauntings don't need exorcism. They just need kindness, and on Halloween, kindness might be the most powerful magic of all.